Today we walk on streets and see only what lies on the surface. But beneath many of the world's oldest cities and fortresses lie hidden veins of stone and earth, tunnels and passages carved by forgotten hands. They were dug for safety, for secrecy, for survival. Some stretched for miles beneath castles, linking them to rivers or forests in case of siege. Others connected temples to markets or houses to wells or entire towns to each other. Many were narrow, dark, and silent, their walls worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, their air carrying the faint scent of earth and mystery dot. To stand in such a tunnel is to feel time pressing close. The light fades, the ceiling lowers, and every sound, a drip of water, the scrape of your own shoe, the flutter of unseen wings, grows louder. You realize that these tunnels were never meant to be grand or beautiful. They were meant to be useful, to carry people unseen, to hide treasures, to guard lives. Tonight, we will walk together into those forgotten places. We will step into the cool shadows beneath castles, follow the twisting paths beneath villages, and imagine the lives of those who built them and those who used them. Each tunnel tells a story of fear, of cleverness, of endurance. And though many lie silent and abandoned now, their secrets remain, waiting for us to listen. Before we begin this quiet journey, take a breath and let yourself settle. If you enjoy these calm explorations of forgotten history, remember to like and subscribe so the next story can find you as well. Now, let us descend into the darkness together and discover the forgotten secrets of ancient tunnels and hidden passages. The image of a castle has always stirred both awe and security in the human mind. High towers reaching into the sky, stone walls so thick that they seemed unbreakable, iron gates standing firm against armies. Yet for those who lived inside, the true guarantee of survival often lay not above embattlements or towers, but below, hidden from sight in places few outsiders could ever imagine. Beneath the great walls and crowded courtyards of many castles stretched a second, secret world, a network of tunnels and hidden passages, carved through earth and stone, built with quiet hands, and known only to a chosen few. These underground arteries were lifelines. They were not meant for parades or triumphs, but for silence, for escape, for survival. They were the difference between being trapped within walls that could no longer hold and finding a way to live beyond them. To understand why these tunnels mattered. Picture a siege, one of the most terrifying realities of medieval life. The enemy has encircled the castle. Fires burn at the base of gates. Arrows rain from the sky. The well inside the courtyard is running dry. The bread baked days earlier grows stale, and hunger gnaws at stomachs more sharply than swords. Within the stone walls, families huddle in chambers, listening to the sounds of war pressing closer with every hour. Hope dwindles. To all appearances, the castle is a cage. Yet somewhere within, hidden beneath a flagstone in the great hall or concealed behind a panel in the Lord's chamber, there lies a passage. It might be little more than a hole just wide enough for one person to crawl through, or it might be a carefully planned tunnel tall enough to walk upright, lined with rough stone blocks to hold back collapse. At the moment of greatest danger, someone whispers the secret. The slab is moved, the panel swung aside, and suddenly the impossible becomes real. There is a way out. The journeys through these tunnels were not grand adventures, but tense, suffocating ordeals. The air inside was cool, damp, sometimes carrying the sharp scent of smoke from torches. Water dripped from cracks in the stone, echoing like footsteps. The walls pressed close, forcing some to stoop, others to crawl, their palms scraping against rough earth. Torches hissed and sputtered, their flames threatening to die with every draft. For those who entered, fear was a constant companion. Fear that the tunnel might collapse, fear that the enemy might discover the exit, fear that a misstep in the dark would mean falling into unseen pits. Yet mingled with fear was a fragile thread of hope. With each labored step, each shuffling crawl, they moved farther from capture, closer to survival. The tunnels themselves were feats of quiet engineering. Some were dug during the original construction of castles, incorporated into blueprints that only the master builder and the Lord knew fully. Others were carved hastily when war seemed imminent, their laborers working in secrecy, carrying soil away at night in baskets, scattering it so as not to raise suspicion. Entrances were hidden with astonishing cleverness. A well might serve two purposes, one visible, drawing water, the other concealed, opening into a shaft that sloped away from the castle foundations. A fireplace might swing open with the right pressure on a stone, revealing stairs spiraling into darkness. A section of the wall might be carved so perfectly that one block, when pushed, swung inward to uncover a hidden descent. These details were not accidents but careful, deliberate choices made to ensure that in the darkest hours when all seemed lost, the castle still held a secret card to play dot. No two tunnels were alike. Some stretched only a short distance, emerging in nearby woods or gullies where fugitives could scatter into the night. Others ran for miles, painstakingly carved beneath fields and valleys, opening at distant rivers where boats could be hidden, or in caves where supplies had been left in anticipation. Some were designed to carry not just people, but goods, barrels of grain, sacks of flour, jars of water. In certain places, tunnels were wide enough for horses, though these were rare and represented the wealthiest or most strategically vital fortresses. More often, they were narrow and crude, carved for desperation rather than comfort, just wide enough to carry life through darkness. That the knowledge of these tunnels was fiercely guarded. Too many knowing meant too much risk. Often only the lord of the castle, his most trusted advisor, and a handful of workers held the full map in their minds. Some families even kept the secret alive through generations, whispered quietly from father to son, mother to daughter, so that the existence of the passage remained hidden even when centuries passed. Betrayal was always a danger. If the enemy learned of the exit, they could block it, ambush those who fled, or worse, use it themselves to enter unseen. The balance between secrecy and utility was delicate, and it shaped how these tunnels lived in memory. Half known, half hidden, always mysterious. But tunnels were not only for fleeing. Many became vital arteries of resistance. During sieges, when gates were barred and walls surrounded, brave couriers slipped out through hidden exits to reach allies, carrying messages of desperation, calling for reinforcements or begging for supplies. Some tunnels allowed food and water to be smuggled in, keeping defenders alive a little longer. Stories tell of livestock, sheep, goats, even chickens, coaxed through narrow shafts to replenish a starving garrison. In these moments, The tunnels became not escapes, but veins carrying lifeblood back into the besieged heart of the fortress. Even in times of peace, they had their uses. Smugglers carried goods through them, bypassing gates and taxes. Lords used them to visit villages unseen, or to escape quietly when threats rose suddenly. Spies moved in and out through their darkness, carrying secrets as valuable as any weapon. And sometimes, long after wars had ended, tunnels lay forgotten, sealed and left to memory, until centuries later, an unsuspecting farmer or builder stumbled across a hidden opening, stepping unknowingly into the same darkness that once saved lives. Time has covered many of these passages, collapsing them into rubble or burying them beneath centuries of soil. Yet, every so often, one is found intact, and stepping into it feels like entering a frozen heartbeat of history. The walls still bear the marks of chisels. Beams of ancient wood cling stubbornly against decay, and the silence is absolute, broken only by the breath of the explorer. Standing there, you can almost feel the footsteps of those who came before, the hurried tread of a guard leading his lord to safety, the labored breathing of a family fleeing flames, the cautious step of a courier carrying hope through darkness. Castles above ground were meant to impress, to intimidate, to endure. But beneath them, the tunnels spoke of something quieter and more profound, the instinct to survive. No matter how thick the walls or high the towers, those who built them knew that strength was not only in stone, but in foresight, not only in swords, but in the hidden courage to carve a path into the earth itself. These secret passages, damp and narrow, carried more than bodies. They carried the determination of generations never to be trapped, never to be cornered, never to surrender without a hidden way forward. So when we think of castles, let us not only imagine banners fluttering in the wind or archers on the walls. Let us remember the unseen world beneath, where survival was whispered in darkness, where escape waited patiently behind disguised stones, where life continued not because of what rose proudly into the sky, but because of what lay hidden beneath, silent and steadfast. Cities, unlike castles, were not meant only for defense. They were built for life, for trade, for the endless hum of people coming and going, for the meeting of strangers and neighbors in crowded squares. But within their walls, hidden from sunlight and the noise of daily life, lay entire worlds carved beneath the streets. These underground passages, tunnels, and chambers were not always built with one purpose in mind. Some carried water, others stored grain, some were shelters, and many were simply forgotten after their usefulness passed. Yet, together, they created a second layer to the city, a shadowy twin beneath the surface, where whispers carried further than shouts, where darkness cloaked both necessity and secrecy. Imagine walking through a bustling ancient city. The streets are crowded with merchants calling out their wares, the clatter of carts on cobblestones, the cries of children weaving between stalls. Everywhere, eyes are on the surface, on the bright goods, the tall gates, the temples, and towers. But just beneath your feet, hidden by stone and earth, a different world exists. Narrow passages run beneath markets, linking warehouses to docks. Subterranean corridors stretch under houses, connecting one family's cellar to another, sometimes deliberately, sometimes accidentally, until an entire neighborhood shares hidden veins. There are tunnels built to carry fresh water, their channels echoing with steady grips, and others carved to carry waste away, their dark paths winding far beneath the light of day. And alongside these practical routes, there are passages dug deliberately for secrecy, ways for guards to move unseen, for valuables to be carried safely, for families to hide in times of danger. To step into one of these hidden places was to leave behind the noise of the city and enter its echo. The walls closed in, the air cooled, and the world above became a faint, muffled hum, as though the ground itself swallowed sound. Torches cast long shadows on damp stone. The smell of earth mixed with smoke, mold, with the faint sharpness of flowing water, filled the nose. In such places, footsteps seemed louder, every breath more noticeable. Those who used these tunnels often moved quickly and silently, their business too secret or too urgent to linger. And yet, for all their darkness, these underground streets were vital threads in the fabric of city life. Some passages were designed for survival. In cities prone to attack, entire underground shelters existed, chambers large enough to hold families for days at a time. Food and water were stored there, waiting for the moment when the streets above were no longer safe. People huddled in those dim rooms, listening for the rumble of danger overhead, whispering to children to keep them calm. These places were carved not for beauty, but for endurance. Their walls rough, their ceilings low, yet their presence carried the comfort of safety. Others were shaped for trade. Merchants who wished to move goods without drawing attention used narrow tunnels to carry grain, spices, or cloth between storage houses and markets. Some cities built official passages beneath docks, where workers could unload ships unseen by the crowded streets above. For them, efficiency and secrecy were worth the labor. The underground became not only a refuge, but an artery of commerce, where wealth moved quietly, beneath the noise of bargaining and shouting above. There were even tunnels, designed for communication, hidden routes allowing guards or officials to travel swiftly from one district to another without crossing crowded roads. Messages were carried this way, delivered with speed and secrecy, as though the city itself had veins through which its lifeblood of information flowed. These passages, though rarely seen by ordinary citizens, gave those in power a quiet advantage. Yet with secrecy also came shadows of another kind. Criminals learned to use abandoned tunnels as hiding places. Smugglers gathered in hidden chambers, waiting for nightfall to move their goods. Escaped prisoners found paths through forgotten drains or water channels. The underground of cities became not only a tool for rulers and merchants, but also a world for those who lived outside the rules. To the authorities above, it was a challenge. How do you control a city when beneath its streets lies a maze no one fully knows? Time deepened the mystery. Generations passed, and many entrances were forgotten. Cellars built over old tunnels, stones collapsed, maps were lost. Yet the passages remained, silent and unseen. When heavy rains came, water sometimes revealed them, rushing through cracks into chambers thought gone. When new buildings were raised, foundations occasionally gave way, uncovering vast spaces no one alive remembered. Each rediscovery was like uncovering a buried memory of the city itself, a reminder that the ground we walk upon has layers of history just beneath to walk through. Such a passage today is to feel a strange duality. On the one hand, there is fear, the close air, the uncertainty of where the tunnel leads, the knowledge that you are far from the safety of the surface. On the other hand, there is wonder, the realization that these same stones once echoed with footsteps of people long gone, that these walls once sheltered lives, that this darkness was once part of survival. The tunnels beneath cities are not simply forgotten voids. They are records of ingenuity, of secrecy, of daily endurance hidden beneath the rhythm of ordinary life. So when we think of ancient cities, let us not imagine only their towers rising high, their gates standing firm, their streets filled with shouts and trade. Let us also picture their shadows, the streets beneath the streets, where people moved unseen, where water flowed, where food was hidden, where safety waited, where whispers carried further than the roar of the crowd above. These passages, though silent now, still speak of the lives that carved them, lives that knew that survival was not only about what was seen, but also about what was hidden. Not all hidden passages belonged to mighty castles or sprawling cities. Many of them were dug quietly beneath smaller fortified homes or within the walls of secluded monasteries, places that on the surface seemed calm and ordinary, yet below held a secret world of stone and silence. These tunnels were not designed to inspire awe or grandeur. They were practical, often humble, but they carried within them the same essence of survival, secrecy, and foresight. While castles bristled with soldiers and cities hummed with trade, these smaller sanctuaries relied on quiet ingenuity, carving beneath their own feet escape routes, storage chambers, and hidden ways that turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. Imagine a fortified house on the edge of a troubled frontier. From the outside, it looks sturdy but not unusual. Stone walls, a wooden gate, a courtyard where animals are kept, a hearth where the family gathers at night. But beneath the floorboards, a trapdoor leads to a shaft cut into the earth. Crawling down into it, you find yourself in a narrow corridor, low and damp, shored up with rough timber beams. The tunnel stretches outward, its air cooler than the room above, carrying you eventually into the cover of a nearby forest or a hollow by the river. This was no accident. Families who lived in constant fear of raids or sudden attacks built these passages not for glory but for safety. They knew that a wall could be scaled, a door broken, but a hidden path beneath the earth might preserve them when all else failed. Within monasteries, these underground worlds served even more varied purposes. Monks, whose lives were often bound to discipline, learning, and silence, built networks beneath their stone cloisters. Some passages connected storehouses, allowing grain, wine, or oil to be moved unseen. Others linked prayer halls to hidden chambers, where manuscripts and precious objects could be concealed in times of danger. There were even tunnels designed purely for safety, exits leading beyond the monastery walls, ready in case bandits or armies came too close. Walking through these subterranean spaces, one could sense both practicality and mystery. The walls echoed faintly with dripping water. The air was rich with the scent of earth and wax from long extinguished candles, and every step felt like trespassing into secrets deliberately hidden away. Life above ground often shaped what was hidden below. In fortified homes, underground chambers doubled as storage cellars, cool places where meat, grain, and dried goods were kept. But behind some of these cellars, a careful eye might notice a crack in the wall, or a section of stone that could be moved with the right effort, opening into a hidden tunnel. Children of the household were often kept unaware, lest a careless word give away the secret. while only the head of the family and a few trusted servants knew the full extent of the labyrinth beneath. The tunnel was an insurance policy, one that might never be used, but one that meant everything, if it ever was. For monasteries, the underground was not only protection, but also continuity. They preserved knowledge, manuscripts, scrolls, and tools in chambers where the temperature was steady and the darkness gentle. In these hidden rooms, monks sometimes worked by the flicker of oil lamps, copying texts or preparing medicines, knowing that should danger come, the most precious parts of their world could be sealed away. The underground was their safeguard against not only hunger or attack, but also forgetting. It was a way of carrying wisdom across years, hidden beneath stone floors where no soldier's torch might find it. The tunnels themselves were simple, yet ingenious. Some were nothing more than dirt packed and shored up with timber, their walls rough and uneven. Others were carved with great care, stone blocks lining the way, niches cut into walls for lamps, ceilings arched to carry weight more safely. In certain monasteries, passages branched into entire networks, small labyrinths designed to confuse outsiders and allow those who knew the way to slip through unseen. These labyrinths were not built to impress visitors. In fact, they were meant never to be seen at all. Their greatness lay in their secrecy, in the fact that they remained invisible until the moment they were most needed. Using such tunnels required courage. For families, descending into them during a raid meant carrying children through damp corridors, hearts pounding as shouts echoed faintly above. For monks, it meant slipping into the earth while hooves thundered at the gates, carrying manuscripts clutched tightly to their chests. The darkness pressed in, the torchlight wavered, and every sound seemed magnified. The crack of wood, the drip of water, the shuffle of sand beneath boots. Yet within this fear lay safety. The walls of the passage became a shield stronger than stone towers above, because no enemy could fight what they could not see. Centuries later, many of these tunnels are found again, sometimes accidentally. A farmer renovating a home uncovers a hollow beneath the floorboards. Builders in a village break through a wall and find a passage running further than they dare follow. In monasteries now quiet, restorers stumble into hidden chambers, lined with niches for storage, some still carrying the faint traces of what was once kept there. These rediscoveries remind us that beneath even the most ordinary places, there were lives thinking ahead, carving safety into the very earth below. To stand in such a tunnel today is to feel history differently. Castles speak of power, cities speak of trade, but these smaller passages whisper of ordinary survival, of families protecting their children, of monks guarding knowledge, of communities preparing quietly for dangers they hoped would never come. They remind us that the instinct to endure is not found only in the mighty, but also in the everyday, in the hidden courage of those who had little more than foresight and determination. So when we think of hidden passages, let us not imagine only the grand networks beneath sprawling fortresses. Let us also remember the humble labyrinths beneath homes and monasteries, places where ordinary people turned silence into safety, where stone and soil became allies, where survival was written not in banners or monuments, but in narrow tunnels no wider than a single person. These forgotten corridors, small and dark, carried not only bodies but also hope, protecting what mattered most in times when the world above was too dangerous to trust. In the long history of human conflict, few experiences were as terrifying as the siege. When armies surrounded a fortress or a city, life within the walls shifted into a desperate rhythm. Gates closed, towers bristled with defenders, and the people inside counted every sack of grain, every barrel of water, knowing that time itself had become their most dangerous enemy. Days dragged into weeks, weeks into months. The air grew heavy with smoke and fear, and every sound from outside, the pounding of rams against gates, the clash of iron, the shouts of soldiers, pressed upon those trapped within. To the attackers, victory seemed inevitable. To the defenders, survival seemed impossible. And yet, beneath their feet, hidden from sight, there often lay a chance, escape routes carved through stone and soil, tunnels that slipped away from the fortress and into the wilderness beyond. These escape tunnels were not luxuries. They were acts of foresight, built by those who understood that even the strongest wall could fall, even the mightiest garrison could weaken. They were veins of possibility, lifelines waiting in silence for the moment they would be needed most. Unlike the grand gates and proud towers, these passages were not meant to be seen. They were narrow, often crude, carved quickly, sometimes only wide enough for one man at a time. Yet within their darkness lay the power to save not only lives, but the very spirit of resistance. For as long as an escape route existed, hope existed. Picture the moment when such a tunnel was used. The fortress above is burning, smoke rising into the sky, the roar of attackers shaking the walls. Within the keep, defenders gather, weary, hungry, their faces lined with soot and fear. The lord of the stronghold gives a nod, and a trapdoor is pulled open, hidden beneath rushes on the floor, or behind a wall that looks no different from any other. A cold draft of air rises, carrying with it the scent of damp earth. Torches are lit, and the first of many descends into the narrow shaft. Armor clinks against stone, boots scrape against soil, and the line of figures vanishes into the earth. They move quickly, but carefully, for collapse or noise could betray them. Behind them, the fortress still groans beneath assault, but with every step forward, the defenders slip away from destruction. Hours later, they emerge in a forest clearing, or by the bend of a river, or at the base of a hill far from enemy eyes. To those waiting outside, the fortress has fallen. But to those who knew the secret, life has been preserved. Building such tunnels required both cunning and courage. Engineers planned them in silence, measuring angles so they would not weaken foundations, calculating distances so they might reach far enough beyond enemy lines. Workers dug carefully, often under cover of night, carrying out baskets of soil that had to be scattered so as not to arouse suspicion. Some tunnels were lined with timber to hold back collapse, others with rough stone to keep them steady. In the most careful designs, air shafts were hidden within walls or disguised as wells, allowing those inside to breathe while still concealed. Every detail mattered, because the tunnel was not only a passage, but a promise that no matter how dire the siege, there would always be a path left unseen. These escape routes also served more than one purpose. They were used to bring supplies into besieged strongholds, allowing allies outside to deliver sacks of grain, skins of water, or even weapons and medicine. At times, messengers slipped through them to carry news to friendly armies, ensuring that reinforcements would come. In some accounts, livestock were even led through narrow shafts, bleeding and stumbling in the dark, but still vital to the survival of those within. Thus, what appeared from above to be a starving, isolated fortress might in fact be quietly sustained by the hidden veins beneath. Yet secrecy was both their strength and their danger. If the enemy discovered the tunnel, it could be used against the very defenders it was meant to protect. There are tales of attackers capturing spies who revealed hidden exits, of tunnels breached and turned into entryways through which enemies poured, catching defenders unprepared. To prevent this, exits were hidden with extraordinary care. Some were disguised as thickets of bush, others as hollow tree trunks, still others as doors hidden in riverbanks or caves that looked natural to any passerby. Even those who built them often swore oaths never to reveal their locations, except to the most trusted heirs. The tunnel's power lay entirely in its secrecy. For those who traveled them, the memory was unforgettable. The tunnels were suffocatingly narrow, the air damp and stale, the walls pressing close. Torches smoked, throwing long, unsteady shadows. Every drip of water, every creak of timber echoed like thunder. The silence was oppressive, broken only by labored breathing and the muffled shuffling of feet. Children were carried, mothers hushed them as they whimpered. Soldiers kept their hands tightly on sword hilts, even though no enemy lurked in the dark. The danger was not only discovery but collapse. Many passages had been hastily dug, their supports fragile, their soil ready to give way. Every step was a gamble, yet every step was also a step away from death. Some tunnels ran so long that hours passed before their end was reached. Defenders, already weakened by hunger and exhaustion, stumbled forward in darkness, guided only by the flicker of torchlight and the hope that the end would come soon. When finally they emerged, blinking into moonlight or dawn, the relief was overwhelming. Behind them, their fortress might already be falling, but ahead of them lay open land, fresh air, and the chance to rebuild. The tunnel, though unseen, had preserved not just lives, but the possibility of a future. Centuries later, the remnants of these escape routes still tell their silent stories. Archaeologists uncover shafts hidden beneath keeps, corridors bricked up and forgotten, passages leading nowhere because their exits have long since collapsed. To stand in them now is to feel the same chill that defenders once felt, to imagine the terror and hope carried in those final moments of flight. These tunnels remind us that war was not only fought with swords and catapults, but also with patience, foresight, and the courage to carve through the very earth in search of survival. So when we think of siege warfare, let us not picture only walls trembling under rams or armies encircling towers. Let us remember also the shadows beneath the battlefield, the escape routes carved in silence, the hidden veins that carried life away from destruction. They were narrow, dark, and dangerous, but they were also proof that even when surrounded, even when trapped, people refused to surrender to despair. In the quiet persistence of those tunnels, we see not only the strategy of war, but the resilience of the human spirit, determined always to find a path forward, even if it had to be carved in darkness beneath the ground. If tunnels carved by hand offered hidden paths for escape, then underground waterways gave something even more remarkable. Natural or engineered corridors where water itself carried the weight of secrecy. Beneath many ancient fortresses and towns, rivers and canals ran unseen, carving through the earth with patience older than any wall. People who discovered or built around these flows of water recognized their power immediately. They could quench thirst during a siege, smuggle supplies under the eyes of enemies, or even carry entire boats unseen beneath the surface. In some places, these waterways were gifts of nature, patiently carved by streams slipping underground. In others, they were the work of countless hands, chiseling through rock to redirect rivers and canals beneath stone foundations. Whatever their origin, they became lifelines that whispered of survival, patience, and ingenuity. Imagine standing within the walls of a besieged city where the enemy waits outside. Wells have been poisoned or run dry, grain is dwindling, and despair is heavy in the air. Yet within the fortress there is a hidden stair, narrow and steep, descending into darkness. At its base lies the faint, steady sound of water. The air grows cooler and damper as you follow the sound, torchlight flickering against stone. And then you arrive at an underground channel where water rushes steadily through carved stone banks. Clay jars are lowered into it, filled quickly, and hauled back to the surface. For those within, this hidden river is salvation. As long as it flows, the fortress cannot starve of thirst. Above, enemies believe they are cutting off every supply. Below, the earth itself keeps the defenders alive. These waterways were often more than wells. In some places, boats could be launched into their depths. Small craft, narrow and shallow, slid quietly along dark tunnels, carrying messengers, sacks of grain, skins of wine, even animals. The sound of paddles echoed softly, bouncing from damp walls. To move through such a place was eerie, the ceiling low, the air thick with moisture, the darkness pressing in from every side. Torches reflected on the water's surface, doubling their light in flickering ripples, while every drip and splash seemed to shout louder than it should. Yet for those who traveled them, the waterways offered both escape and connection, threading the fortress to the wider world unseen. Some of these underground channels were deliberate works of engineering, parcours, feats that demanded years of labor. Entire crews of diggers carved through stone with chisels and hammers, reinforcing walls with timber or brick, shaping channels to guide water where it was needed most. Shafts were cut above to provide air, cleverly disguised as wells or vents. Entrances were hidden in cellars, in courtyards, or beneath unremarkable stones, known only to those who needed them. To construct such a waterway was to invest not only in convenience but in survival, for in times of crisis the difference between life and death often flowed along. Those hidden currents, other waterways, were gifts of the land itself, discovered rather than built. Caves where rivers slipped into darkness became natural corridors, embraced and used by those who lived nearby. Fortresses were deliberately built above them, taking advantage of what the earth already offered. In some valleys, whole towns aligned their defenses with underground springs, ensuring that even in the longest siege, water would never run dry. These natural passages were both blessings and dangers. Blessings because they gave defenders what attackers could not cut off. Dangers because if an enemy discovered their exits, they could be used to sneak inside. For this reason, the mouths of such rivers were often concealed, blocked with stones, disguised with brush, or guarded at all times. Using these waterways was never simple. The journeys along them were slow, often terrifying. Imagine climbing into a boat in total darkness, the water lapping cold against the wood. The torch you hold sputters in the damp air, threatening to die. The ceiling is low. At times you must duck your head to avoid scraping stone. The current pulls you forward, sometimes gentle, sometimes fast, and you paddle softly, every splash echoing. Behind you, silence swallows your trail. Ahead, the tunnel seems endless, a black throat leading deeper into the earth. And yet, eventually, light appears, a faint glow from an opening, hidden among reeds or rocks miles away from the fortress. Emerging there, you feel as though the earth itself has carried you into freedom. Supplies, too, traveled this way. Jars of grain sealed in clay, bundles of dried meat wrapped in cloth, wineskins filled to the brim, all floated silently along these dark canals. In times when walls above shook from siege engines, these small boats carried the difference between starvation and endurance. And once, perhaps, when night fell and attackers grew careless, defenders themselves slipped into the channels, leaving behind a fortress that seemed doomed, only to emerge far beyond the reach of enemy blades. Centuries later, the traces of these secret waterways still linger. Explorers crawling through caves stumble upon stone-carved banks, channels too straight and neat to be natural, clearly shaped by human hands. Archaeologists find bricks blackened by torch smoke, niches cut into walls where lamps once flickered, wooden beams preserved by dampness still holding ceilings firm. In some places, entire boats have been found buried in silt, their purpose long forgotten, but their presence whispering of journeys once made in silence. Standing in such a place today is to feel a strange mix of awe and unease. The darkness is heavy, the air cool and wet, the sound of water constant. It is easy to imagine those who once risked everything in these spaces, defenders carrying jars against their chest, messengers steering small boats through blackness, children clinging to their mothers as the water lapped at their feet. These waterways were not made for comfort. They were made for survival, and every drop of water that flowed through them carried that truth dot. So when we think of tunnels and hidden passages, let us not forget the rivers and canals that slipped beneath the earth. They were the quiet veins of fortresses and towns, carrying not only water, but life itself. They reminded those above that the earth could be an ally, that in its darkness flowed a constant promise of endurance. And they remind us now that survival has always required more than walls or weapons. It has required ingenuity, patience, and the courage to trust even the shadows beneath our feet. If tunnels were the veins of hidden worlds, then the chambers carved beside them were the hearts. Silent rooms buried in stone, built to protect, to store, to shelter. These underground chambers were not the grand halls of castles above or the lively markets of cities. They were small, plain, and often bare, yet their importance was immense. In times of danger, they became safe rooms where families huddled away from raiders. In times of need, they became storage vaults, holding grain, water, or weapons for the day when survival required them. And in times of silence, they became refuges, places where people could wait, unseen and unheard, until the storm of violence or uncertainty had passed. Imagine descending into one of these hidden chambers centuries ago. The entrance is disguised perhaps through a trapdoor beneath a bed, or behind a section of wall that swings open when the right stone is pressed. The air grows cooler as you move downward, the light from your torch throwing shadows against the rough walls. At the bottom, the space opens into a small room, no bigger than a cottage room above, its ceiling low, its walls lined with niches. In one corner, jars of grain are stacked carefully, sealed with wax to keep them fresh. In another, water jars stand ready, their clay sides cool to the touch. There may be benches carved from stone or timber planks for resting, perhaps even straw laid across the floor to make the stay bearable. Nothing about it is comfortable, yet everything about it speaks of foresight. This is not a place for living, but for surviving. These hidden chambers took many forms. Some were simple, dug quickly and roughly, meant only to hide a family for a few hours during an attack. Others were elaborate, carved with skill, reinforced with stone, and designed to hold dozens of people for days or even weeks. In certain fortified houses, entire lower levels were made as false basements, invisible from outside, capable of storing both people and supplies until danger passed. In monasteries, hidden rooms beneath cloisters protected manuscripts, relics, and medicine, treasures not of wealth but of knowledge and healing. In cities, chambers beneath streets doubled as both warehouses and refuges, their double purpose known only to merchants and guards. The uses of these chambers were as varied as the fears that shaped them. During raids, families slipped inside, bringing children, food, and sometimes even animals, sealing themselves away as attackers ransacked homes above. To the raiders, the house seemed deserted, its wealth taken, its people fled. But in truth, behind thick stone, entire households sat silently in the dark, listening to the muffled chaos above, praying that the noise would fade and the door could be opened once more. For those hidden inside, every sound was magnified. Boots clattering on floorboards above, voices shouting, doors crashing open. They sat still, breathing quietly, knowing that a single cry might give them away. Hours stretched long in the dark, and fear pressed close. But when the danger finally passed, the chamber had done its work. In times of siege, these rooms became storage vaults of survival. Grain kept in sealed jars, dried meat hung from beams, water stored in heavy clay. These supplies allowed defenders to hold out longer than enemies expected. Some chambers even held weapons, carefully hidden, until the moment came to arm themselves again. To open such a room was to step into a place heavy with the smell of stored food, the faint must of damp stone, the lingering smoke of old torches. Within those walls, life could be stretched far beyond what seemed possible above. The construction of these chambers was itself an act of cleverness. Builders dug into hillsides or beneath thick walls, ensuring that the chamber would be hidden by layers of stone and earth. Entrances were disguised with astonishing care, a panel behind shelves, a floorboard thicker than the rest, a fireplace that pivoted with pressure on the right stone. Even if enemies stormed the house or monastery, they would see nothing but plain walls and floors. The secret was not in what could be seen, but in what could not. For many generations, the knowledge of these entrances was passed quietly, shared only with trusted family members or brothers within an order. To lose the secret was to risk everything. Inside, life moved differently. In moments of refuge, families tried to make the dark room feel human. Mothers whispered songs to children, fathers carved marks into the stone to count the days. Elders told stories in low voices to pass the hours. The chamber became not just a hiding place, but a world suspended in waiting. Hunger gnawed, air grew stale, the flicker of lamps dimmed, but as long as the walls held and the entrance remained undiscovered, the people inside endured. There are tales of chambers that saved entire lineages, of families who vanished beneath their homes only to emerge days later when raiders had gone, carrying on their lives because the earth had hidden them. There are also stories of chambers that became tombs, collapsing or being discovered, their silence turning to tragedy. Both kinds of stories remind us that survival underground was never guaranteed, but always sought because the chance to live was worth every risk. Centuries later, many of these hidden rooms have been rediscovered. Archaeologists have uncovered chambers filled with broken jars, straw still scattered across floors, walls blackened by smoke. In some, tools or weapons remain, abandoned in haste. In others, faint carvings of names, symbols, or prayers mark the stone left by those who once waited in the dark. Standing in such a chamber today, one can feel the closeness of the air, the press of silence, and the weight of history lingering in the stone. These were places not of grandeur, but of endurance, built by hands that knew life could change in an instant, and that survival required both foresight and secrecy. So when we think of hidden chambers, let us not imagine treasure hoards or mythic secrets alone. Let us imagine families sitting quietly in the dark, grain sealed carefully in jars, manuscripts wrapped and hidden in niches, voices hushed as danger passed above. Let us picture the builders carving stone by torchlight, sealing the entrance with a smile of grim satisfaction, knowing that one day this small, plain room might save everything they loved. Let us remember that history is not only written in sunlight, but also in darkness and the silent refuges beneath our feet, where people waited, endured, and emerged to live another day. Beneath the surface of many towns and fortresses lay not only escape routes or hiding places, but entire arteries of commerce, hidden trade routes carved in silence, where smugglers and merchants moved as quietly as shadows. These passages were born from necessity, but they grew into something more. They were not just paths for survival, but corridors of wealth, channels through which grain, salt, cloth, and sometimes far rarer goods traveled unseen. Above ground, markets rang with the noise of bargaining and the shouts of guards who collected taxes and enforced laws. Below ground, in dim tunnels lit by torches and lanterns, another economy flourished, one unrecorded, one that left little behind but warm stones and whispered stories. Imagine a medieval town at dusk. Merchants pack away their goods, guards close the gates, and silence spreads across the cobbled streets. But beneath those quiet stones and tunnels that twist between warehouses and riversides, life continues. Smugglers push carts with squealing wheels, their loads hidden beneath cloth. Traders carry sacks of spices, bolts of fabric, even coins that will never pass through official hands. The tunnels are narrow, their ceilings dripping with moisture, the air smelling faintly of earth, oil, and smoke. Shadows flicker as torches sway, and whispers echo far louder than they should. Each step taken is careful, each glance backward filled with suspicion. Down here, every movement carries risk, but also reward. These underground trade routes often began as something else: drainage channels, water conduits, or old escape passages forgotten by the lords who once built them. Over time, those with sharp eyes and desperate needs discovered their potential. If a passage led to the river, it could carry goods out without ever touching the guarded gates. If a tunnel opened near a warehouse, it could move entire shipments unseen. And if a chamber connected to a marketplace cellar, then goods could appear suddenly, bypassing tax collectors and officials. What began as practicality became opportunity, and opportunity became economy. Smuggling through these routes was not simply the work of thieves. Many were ordinary merchants squeezed by high taxes or harsh restrictions. When the difference between profit and ruin lay in what the authorities demanded, slipping through the earth became a lifeline. In these tunnels, flour moved to hungry families without the weight of tariffs. Salt passed into hands that could not otherwise afford it, and cloth was sold at prices free from official control. Alongside necessity came luxury, rare spices, exotic silks, coins from distant lands. To carry such goods through the dark was dangerous, but the darkness also hid the fortune it promised. The networks grew more complex with every generation. In some towns, entire labyrinths of secret trade routes existed, known only to those who used them. Entrances were hidden beneath tavern floors, behind barrels in warehouses, or in cellars that looked ordinary, but opened with a lever disguised as a wooden beam. Routes were marked not with maps, but with memory, passed from one smuggler to another, whispered in half-truths and coded phrases. A wrong turn could lead to a dead end or worse, into the arms of guards who patrolled the deeper tunnels. But for those who knew the way, these passages became safer than the crowded streets above. The risks were constant. Collapse was always possible, as many of the passages were old and unstable. Torches could sputter and die, leaving men blind in the choking dark. And of course, discovery by the authorities meant punishment, often harsh. Yet, for every danger, there was determination. Smugglers accepted the risks because the rewards were so great, and because in many ways the hidden economy supported lives that the official one could not. Families ate bread bought with smuggled flour. Villagers warmed themselves with salt fish carried through the shadows. Children wore clothes stitched from fabric that never passed through the hands of tax collectors. Beneath the city, a second marketplace existed, silent, unseen, but vital. These underground routes also tied towns to one another. In some regions, tunnels stretched for miles, connecting one settlement to another, winding through hillsides, sometimes surfacing briefly in forests before diving back underground. Along these hidden highways, caravans moved not with wagons and horses, but with porters carrying goods on their backs, each step echoing in the dimness. To walk these paths was to enter a world apart, where daylight felt distant, and the only companions were the whispers of those beside you and the creak of ropes pulling heavy loads. Over centuries, the silent economy shaped entire regions. Markets flourished above ground, but much of their wealth was fed by what passed below, unseen. Rulers tried to stop it with patrols, with guards searching cellars, with laws against concealed doors, but the tunnels always outlasted them. For every passage discovered and sealed, another was dug, another entrance disguised, another chamber hollowed out. The underground was patient. It did not shout or declare itself. It simply endured, carrying wealth in silence, while the world above moved on unaware to step into. One of these passages today is to feel that endurance still. The walls are smooth in places where countless hands brushed against them. Niches cut into stone still hold the remains of old lamps, blackened with soot. In corners, the faint trace of barrels or crates lies in rotted wood, reminders of goods once moved in haste. The air is heavy, cool, and still, but if you listen closely, it almost seems to echo with footsteps, the hurried tread of smugglers, the hushed voices of merchants, the endless pulse of the silent economy that once thrived beneath the surface dot. So when we think of tunnels and hidden chambers, let us not imagine only escape or war. Let us remember the trade routes that stretched unseen beneath our feet, where wealth flowed in silence, where necessity and greed walked side by side, and where the true life of cities often pulsed, not in the open sunlit streets, but in the dark passages below. For in those shadows families survived, merchants prospered, and the hidden economy wrote a chapter of history that official records could never fully erase. When fortresses fell silent and their banners no longer fluttered in the wind, what remained was not only stone walls crumbling under time, but also the hidden veins beneath them, labyrinths of tunnels, chambers, and passages that lay waiting in darkness. These places, once carved with purpose and desperation, did not vanish simply because wars ended or rulers left. They lingered, abandoned, but not destroyed, preserved by the earth itself. And in their silence they became even more mysterious, as if the walls still carried the echoes of the countless footsteps, hurried whispers, and desperate breaths of those who once depended upon them. Imagine approaching one of these fortresses centuries after it was deserted. The towers rise, but their tops are broken. Ivy crawls up their stones, and birds nest where banners once flew. The courtyard is empty, grass growing between cracked stones, the wind carrying only silence, where once there was the noise of soldiers, merchants, and families. To most eyes, the place is dead, but beneath your feet, in layers of darkness, there are corridors stretching outward like the branches of a hidden tree. They twist and turn, connecting chambers long sealed, reaching out to exits concealed in hillsides or riverbanks, winding through the earth in forgotten patterns. These labyrinths, though unseen, are still alive in their stillness. The labyrinths of abandoned fortresses were often far more complex than ordinary tunnels. When fortresses were at their height, rulers invested immense effort into their underground networks. They dug not just one or two passages, but entire systems, complete with crossroads, storage chambers, false routes to confuse enemies, and hidden exits carefully placed miles away. Some were built as mazes on purpose, designed to disorient any intruder who might discover them. Even the defenders themselves sometimes carried markers or etched symbols on walls to remember the correct way forward. Once the fortresses above were deserted, these underground webs remained like skeletons beneath the skin, forgotten but not gone. Over time, nature began to claim them. Water seeped through cracks, filling passages with pools that reflected the flicker of torchlight. Roots pushed through ceilings, their tendrils dangling like curtains of shadow. Insects and bats filled chambers that once echoed with human voices. Yet despite the decay, many of these labyrinths endured, their stone walls holding strong, their air heavy but breathable. To wander through one today is to feel the weight of centuries pressing down. The sensation that you are not merely in an empty tunnel, but in a place where history itself has paused, holding its breath in silence, People who stumbled upon these labyrinths in later centuries often told stories of strangeness. Farmers digging wells found hollow spaces where their tools struck nothing but air. Children exploring ruins uncovered doors that opened into darkness deeper than they dared to enter. Travelers whispered of strange drafts of wind emerging from cracks in hillsides, cool air rising from nowhere. Each discovery hinted at a world beneath, but few were brave enough to follow far. For in those abandoned labyrinths danger lurked, not from enemies, but from the earth itself. Ceilings might collapse without warning. Chambers could flood in sudden rains, and the silence was so deep that it weighed on the mind, making every explorer feel watched, as though the ghosts of defenders past still lingered in the stone. The functions of these labyrinths were many. Some sections had once been used to store grain, wine, or weapons, and remnants of these supplies sometimes remained. Shards of pottery, rusted blades, fragments of cloth. Other sections were designed purely for survival, with long, narrow corridors leading far beyond fortress walls, exits still disguised after hundreds of years. There were also false passages, dead ends built deliberately to trick enemies. To stumble into one centuries later was to find yourself in a silent cul-de-sac of stone, wondering if perhaps others had been trapped here before, their hopes extinguished, and the dark legends grew around these places. Some claimed that treasure was hidden deep within the labyrinths, left behind by lords who fled. Others whispered that prisoners were sealed inside, their voices echoing still. Tales of hauntings spread, flickers of torchlight seen where no one walked, footsteps echoing in empty corridors, whispers that followed explorers until they fled back into daylight. Whether true or not, such stories only added to the aura of mystery that clung to every abandoned fortress. The labyrinths beneath them became symbols not only of survival, but of memory. Memory twisted by time into myth yet beyond legends. These spaces remind us of something deeply human. The people who built them did so out of fear and hope combined. Fear of being trapped, hope of finding escape. They invested labor, sweat, and patience into carving safety beneath their feet. When the fortresses above fell silent, the earth preserved their work. And when we discover them today, we are reminded that survival often depends not only on strength above ground, but on foresight hidden below dot. Standing in such a labyrinth now, lantern in hand, is an experience unlike any other. The air is cool, heavy, and still. Every sound you make seems to echo for miles. Walls close in, then open suddenly into chambers where shadows linger in corners. A passage turns, then splits, and suddenly you are surrounded by choices, each one leading deeper into the unknown. You begin to understand how easily someone could be lost here, how carefully defenders once memorized every turn, how important symbols scratched into stone once were. And as you move forward, you cannot shake the feeling that the labyrinth itself remembers footsteps, remembers fear, remembers survival. So when we think of abandoned fortresses, let us not imagine only broken towers or empty courtyards. Let us also imagine the world below, the forgotten labyrinths that stretch unseen, still holding their secrets in silence. They are more than stone and darkness. They are echoes of lives lived in vigilance, of struggles for survival, of determination that even when fortresses fell, the hidden paths beneath them might endure. In their silence they speak louder than ruins above, reminding us that history does not end when walls crumble. It lingers in the dark, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be remembered. Great capitals were not only built for power, ceremony, and trade. They were also built for survival, and nowhere is that more clearly seen than in the vast networks of passages, chambers, and hidden ways that ran beneath them. Above ground, capitals dazzled with palaces, temples, marketplaces, and walls so tall that they seemed to scrape the sky. Streets bustled with merchants and travelers, guards patrolled, and citizens filled every corner with the noise of life. But below those lively surfaces in shadows few ever saw, another city often existed, a silent twin beneath the earth, carved in darkness. These subterranean secrets were essential to the way capitals functioned, and they carried within them the most human of truths, that safety and continuity must always be hidden alongside grandeur. Imagine entering an ancient capital at the height of its power. At the gates, guards in shining armor stand ready. Markets hum with voices. The air carries the scent of spices, baked bread, and smoke from countless hearths. Palaces gleam with banners. Temples rise proudly above the rooftops. And everywhere you look, stone and brick speak of wealth and permanence. Yet if you could slip past a guarded stairwell or follow a trusted servant into a cellar, you would discover another world entirely. Beneath the stone floors, steps descend into darkness. The air cools, sounds from above grow muffled, and soon you are walking along corridors cut carefully into the earth. Torchlight flickers, shadows stretch, and you realize that this capital is not only what you see, it is also what lies hidden beneath your feet. These underground spaces served many purposes. In times of peace, they were practical. Storage vaults for grain, wine, and valuables. Cool chambers where food lasted longer. Passages where goods could be moved from docks to markets unseen by crowds. They were also used to manage the flow of water. Entire aqueducts and drains ran beneath capitals, carrying fresh water in and waste out, carved with precision by engineers who knew that the health of thousands depended on what was hidden. Some of these channels were wide enough for men to walk through, others narrow, but together they created veins that allowed the great heart of the city above to beat steadily in times of war or unrest. The same underground spaces took on far greater importance. Hidden passages linked palaces to fortified towers, allowing rulers to move unseen. Escape routes led from city walls to distant valleys, ready to carry entire families away from danger. Secret chambers beneath palaces became refuges, their walls thick enough to muffle the chaos above. Messengers moved swiftly through tunnels, carrying vital information from one district to another without ever showing themselves on the surface. In these moments, the city's true resilience was not in the height of its walls, but in the depth of its earth. Capitals, more than smaller towns or castles, often developed entire labyrinths below their streets. Over centuries, one tunnel connected to another. One chamber opened into others, until the network was so vast that even those who lived in the city often did not know its full extent. Servants whispered of staircases behind hidden panels, of wells that led not only to water, but also to corridors stretching miles away, of doors in palace cellars that no one dared to open without permission. In this way, the underground was both known and unknown, a secret everyone suspected, but few fully understood. The atmosphere in these subterranean places was unlike anything above. The air was cooler, sometimes damp, sometimes heavy. The silence was deep, broken only by the echo of footsteps or the drip of unseen water. Walls were marked by centuries of use, smooth in places where countless hands had brushed against them. Lamps once set into niches had long since gone out, leaving only black stains of soot. In larger chambers, ceilings arched high above, shadows retreating into unseen corners. In narrower passages, the walls pressed close, forcing those who passed through to stoop or crawl. To walk in these places was to feel removed from time itself, as though the capital above was only an echo, and the true endurance of the city lay in the dark. Merchants and smugglers also found ways to use these hidden routes. Goods taxed heavily above ground could move freely below. Spices, cloth, and even coins traveled in the dark, carried from one market to another, bypassing official eyes. For rulers, this was a problem, but for citizens, it was often a lifeline. Families who could not afford the costs of taxed goods found them cheaper, thanks to the silent economy beneath their feet. In this way, the underground became not only a place of secrecy, but also of survival in the everyday sense, a hidden market sustaining life as surely as the open one above. Over time, as capitals grew, the underground grew with them. Old tunnels were forgotten, sealed, or collapsed, only for new ones to be built beside them. The result was layer upon layer of history, stacked not only in the buildings above, but also in the earth below. In some capitals, entire forgotten levels of streets and houses were eventually buried, replaced by new construction above, turning the underground into a museum of lives once lived. To step into such a place today is to walk through centuries at once. A Roman drain beneath a medieval cellar, a forgotten warehouse beneath a Renaissance street, a sealed chamber beneath a palace still standing tall. Each layer tells a story, not of the grand parades or battles, but of the quiet persistence of daily life. Legends flourished around these subterranean worlds. People told of rulers who fled unseen through passages, of treasures hidden beneath palaces, of prisoners kept in chambers where no light ever reached. Some believed that spirits lingered there, the souls of those who had died unseen in the dark. Others spoke of labyrinths so vast that no one who entered them without a guide ever returned. These stories added to the aura of mystery, making the underground both feared and respected. Children were warned not to stray into old cellars. Travelers were told to avoid the cracks and ruined streets, where cold air rose from below dot. And yet, for all the fear, the underground remained essential. Capitals could not function without them. Water flowed because of what was hidden, food lasted longer because of the cool earth. Rulers survived because escape routes waited unseen, and entire populations endured because in times of hunger or danger, the dark offered safety. The grandeur above was real, but it was fragile without the secrets below dot to stand today in the underground. Of an ancient capital is to feel the pulse of history in silence. You see the marks of chisels on stone, the soot of forgotten lamps, the grooves worn into steps by countless feet. You feel the closeness of the air, the stillness of centuries pressing upon you. And in that stillness you understand that the city above, with all its triumphs and glories, could not have existed without this hidden twin. The underground was its foundation not only in stone but in spirit. a reminder that survival depends not only on what is seen, but also on what is hidden. So when we remember great capitals of the past, let us not only think of their palaces and marketplaces, their towers and walls. Let us also remember the silent city beneath them, the subterranean secrets that allowed them to endure. For in those dark passages lies the truest record of resilience, a history carved not in sunlight but in shadow, waiting for us to listen. The story of hidden passages and tunnels does not end in the pages of chronicles or in the memories of battles long past. They remain with us still, silent and waiting, carved in stone and earth, lying beneath fields, villages, and cities. Their presence is a reminder that the past is never entirely gone. Even when towers have fallen and walls have crumbled, the shadows beneath the ground endure. Today, archaeologists, historians, and even ordinary people continue to rediscover these secret veins of history. Each tunnel, each chamber, each hollowed-out corridor speaks to us across centuries, telling stories of survival, of ingenuity, and of lives lived in quiet resilience. When modern explorers step into these hidden spaces, the experience is unlike walking through ruins above ground. A ruined fortress under the sun feels open, almost forgiving. Grass grows between stones, and birds sing in its towers. But underground, time is heavier. Air lies still, cool against the skin, carrying the smell of earth that has not been disturbed for centuries. Torches or lamps reveal walls blackened by soot from fires long gone, tool marks left by hands that once dug in urgency or patience, and niches carved for lamps still faintly stained with smoke. In some chambers, straw is found fossilized against the stone, remnants of beds where families once lay in silence. In others, broken jars remain, their clay sealed shut for centuries until the earth itself broke them open. To see such things is to feel the closeness of the past, as though the people who once hid there had only just left. Some tunnels are so well preserved that walking through them feels like stepping directly into another age. In certain European castles, escape routes still lead from halls to rivers, their exits disguised even now among reeds and rocks. In cities layered with centuries of history, entire underground streets have been discovered, once bustling but later buried as new buildings rose above them. Archaeologists crawling through these spaces speak of the strangeness of hearing their own voices echo where others once whispered in fear or hope. These tunnels remind us that history was not only lived above ground, but also carried forward in silence beneath. For local communities, the discovery of hidden passages often brings both wonder and unease. Farmers digging foundations stumble upon hollow spaces, their tools striking stone that rings with emptiness. Children exploring ruins find cracks in walls where cold air rises, leading into darkness they dare not enter. Builders repairing old houses uncover cellars deeper than expected, revealing doors that open into passages that stretch further than anyone imagined. Each discovery reshapes how we see the land around us, reminding us that beneath the familiar lies a second, forgotten world. Legends still cling to these places. Villagers tell stories of treasures buried in hidden chambers, of prisoners locked away forever, of ghosts wandering in the dark. Whether true or not, these tales speak of the power these spaces hold in human imagination. Even when empty, a tunnel feels alive. The silence within seems to carry voices. The shadows seem to move. and every echo makes us wonder if someone once stood where we stand now. These emotions are part of their legacy, not only the physical stone, but the atmosphere of secrecy and survival that clings to them across time. Modern technology has added new layers to our understanding. Ground-penetrating radar and imaging tools reveal patterns beneath cities that were long forgotten. Maps are redrawn as archaeologists trace the outlines of passages no one suspected. Entire networks have been uncovered beneath palaces, monasteries, and marketplaces, showing just how deeply survival was woven into the lives of those who built them. Yet even with technology, mystery remains. Many tunnels are too fragile to explore fully, their ceilings close to collapse, their air unbreathable after centuries sealed. Some will remain secrets forever, their stories locked in the earth, and yet, perhaps it is fitting that some mysteries remain. For the legacy of hidden passages is not only in what we know, but also in what we cannot. They remind us that history has layers we cannot fully uncover, that the lives of those before us were both visible and hidden, both spoken and silent. Just as the people who built these tunnels lived with fear and hope, so too do we live with the mystery they left behind. To walk in one of these hidden places today is to feel humbled. You may crouch to pass through a narrow corridor, your lamp barely holding back the dark. You may step into a chamber and hear your footsteps echo, realizing that centuries ago, others stood in this same place, waiting for danger to pass. You may trace your hand across a wall and feel the grooves left by chisels, each mark a memory of labor, of desperation, of faith and survival. In that moment did the centuries collapse, and you are no longer just a visitor. You are part of the story, joined to the countless lives that once moved unseen through the same silence. The silent legacy of hidden passages is this: they endure as reminders that history is not only grand monuments or recorded victories. It is also fear carried in the dark, courage hidden in silence, survival carved into stone. They are lessons of foresight, showing us that even the proudest walls were never trusted fully, that wisdom lay in preparing for the unseen. They are echoes of ordinary lives, whispering that survival is as important a triumph as glory. And they are bridges across time, inviting us to step into their darkness and remember. And so, as we leave behind the world of tunnels and hidden chambers, let us carry their lesson with us. History is not only what rises high into the sky, shining in sunlight, but also what lies buried in shadow, unseen yet essential. The fortresses, cities, monasteries, and homes of the past were more than walls and rooftops. They were layered worlds with lives unfolding above and secrets enduring below. The silent passages we have explored remind us that the human instinct to survive has always been as strong as the instinct to build, and that even in darkness, people found ways to protect what mattered most. Take a moment now, in this quiet, to let your thoughts rest on the hidden stories that lie beneath every step we take. Beneath streets, beneath fields, beneath ruins, the earth still holds echoes of lives once lived in silence. Their voices may be gone, but their tunnels remain, carrying their memory across centuries. If you enjoyed this calm journey into forgotten history, remember to like and subscribe so the next story may find you again. For now, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the silence of these hidden places carry you gently toward rest. The tunnels are dark, the chambers are still, and history itself whispers softly, waiting for you to drift into sleep.